Each season I love to come out with a annual rut forecast, whether that's in video format or in my articles. But the rut is a magical time of the year. You know, I love it, you love it, or you wouldn't be watching this, but as a deer hunter, is there a better time of the year to be out in the woods and enjoy what we all have a passion and love for doing? That's why I'm doing this right here. I love it. But that being said, you know, you're here for a rut forecast, and I'm going to tell you, I hate to burst the bubble, but the rut's going to take place at the same time in your location, in your woods, your habitat, in your portion of whatever state you're in, at the same time every single year. Now there's a little variance. You might see some incredible rut activity in southern Michigan last week of October, while someone else in southern Michigan isn't seeing any rut activity till the 1st of November. That can easily be explained. And it's not that there's something magical happening in one spot versus the other, but when you have a collection of older bucks on your land, which I call core bucks, and you have those bucks that are there in late September, October, or they move in October sometime, then you can imagine if you have a lot of mature bucks on your land, then you're going to see a lot of pre-rut activity towards the end of October. Someone else, a couple miles away, if they don't have that collection of bucks on their land, then they're not going to see that pre-rut activity. So that can vary by 7 to 10 days. And that's no different in Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, South Dakota, Iowa, wherever your favorite state is, and we happen to be in Southwest Wisconsin right here. So really, the timing is the same time every year. Now, pre-rut around here in Southwest Wisconsin, we get a little bit of activity, some really hard activity after a cold front comes through, and that's going to take place right around 23rd, 25th, 27th of October, when the weather conditions are just perfect. It's not that the weather spurns activity or spurns the rut, it's just that it creates the conditions for comfortable cruising, comfortable rutting activity. You can imagine if it's 90 degrees, October 24th, there's not much going on, including with hunters. We really don't want to climb these hills around here in that heat. I don't think the deer do either. Now, if you go down to Ohio, southern Ohio, where I like to hunt on public land, then that pre-rut activity is taking place more at the end of October, early November. So you can see about a week to 10-day difference. And if you're down in southern Iowa, maybe even Missouri or Kansas, you're going to see that rut take place a week or 10 days later than you would in Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. Instead of even having a peak rut in Southwest Wisconsin in early November, the 5th of November, 6th of November, 7th, 8th, 9th, whatever it might be. Same with Michigan, maybe Minnesota. You might see that move back to the 10th, 15th, 17th in southern Ohio, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri. But the timing's all the same. I hate to burst it. Doesn't matter what the moon is. Doesn't matter what the weather is. Does are going to be bred during those times. And there's a progression that I like to follow for each phase of the rut: the pre-rut, the lockdown phase, the peak rut, the post-rut, and of course the secondary rut in early December time frame, depending on what state you're in. With that, and with that timing being the same, just need to check with the local biologist in your area. They'll be able to tell you about when that rut's taking place. I love to hunt cold fronts, so it doesn't matter if it's end of September, early October, in through the middle of October, in through any phase of the rut, and into December. I love to hunt cold fronts. To me, long, boring times of warm weather, followed by a major front that comes through. Could be rain, could be snow. High winds are preferred, extreme weather. Deer miss those 5 feedings a day that they like, or they're reduced. By the time that rut or that big front busts through, then those deer are ready to feed, they're ready to move, and those create some outstanding conditions. I've been writing about that for many years, been creating videos on it too, and that's something that, yeah, the mood phase might create a little bit of movement, 5–10% of the picture, but weather holds the key to when those deer are going to move and when they have the conditions for movement. Not that the rut is created by the weather, but it creates conditions for movement. So once you figure out the timing of your rut near your area, which is the same every year, once you figure out if you're hunting core bucks or non-core bucks, if you have those deer available for the pre-rut, those bucks, or if you don't, once you figure out which days you want to hunt based on the weather, based on when you have your time off at work, then it's time to head to the woods. And I'd like to go through in this rut forecast each phase of the rut, and I think I have some valuable tips for you in each one of those phases that'll help you capitalize on the rut in 2018. It's not about the timing, it's not about when that rut starts by some magical formula that I release based on the moon, weather. Rut's always at the same time, But I think there's some key factors that'll help you this season if you can follow this advice through each phase of the rut. Make sure that you're in your stand in the right location to take advantage of each phase, because there's a little bit of difference between each one. And I'd love to see you have a successful rut in 2018. The pre-rut phase is probably my favorite time of the year. And you know, compared to the peak rut, there's bucks flying around all day sometimes. The pre-rut isn't quite the same. But boy, you wait all year for it. You have the build-up. And for my own personal success, during that last week to 10 days of October in Southwest Wisconsin or Michigan, then I'm typically 50% of the years putting a buck on the ground. My mature bucks going back to the early 90s during that last week to 10 days of October, you know, before November hits. And it's because I love to take advantage of these pre-rut opportunities. Now, during that time frame, if you don't have any mature bucks on your land, if you don't have any core bucks that are hanging around during October and they're in and around your property during daylight, you might think the rut hasn't started. But every year, that pre-rut's going to start in that last week to 10 days of October in Southwest Wisconsin, in southern Michigan, over into Minnesota, northern Indiana, northern Illinois. You're going to see some rutting activity, especially when you get a cold front. Now, if you're a big mature buck and you have that body weight and fat on you, if it's 85 degrees on the 22nd of October, probably not going to move too much. But when you get into 3 days later and there's a cold front and the high goes from 82 down to a high of 57, you're getting morning lows in the 20s, boy, do not miss that opportunity. If you're going to call in sick anytime for work, you know, you want to be actually sick, but if you're going to call in for work, that's the time to do it. Pre-rut stand, to me, bucks are really moving around during that cold period of time in the morning. It's not to say you don't get a little bit of pre-rut activity in the evening, but if you have local mature bucks, you have bucks and core bucks that are on your land, don't miss out on those cold front mornings. Now, in this location right here, I actually killed Diego, a buck that I was after 2 years ago, right over in a stand about 60, 70 yards away. In 2014, my buck was shot right over there, just 60, 70 yards. And in both those bucks in October, this is what has all the ingredients to a pre-rut stand. What I like in a pre-rut stand is I want to be somewhat close to buck bedding areas. Diego, we feel, was bedding right over here about 150 yards in some rocks. A lot of the mature bucks in this area come out of this draw. They're just over there, 100 to 200 yards away. So when I come up here in the morning, I'm letting my wind blow out into open field here. I'm getting these rising thermals. My scent is not a concern, even though it takes 40 minutes to walk all the way up here, get into the stand and get ready. Perfect pre-rut conditions, because I'm in an area where I'm near buck bedding. I'm in a funnel where it constricts field edge, thick sides, ridge tops. I get a lot of crossing through here. We have a mock scrape right down there by the camera. We have a water hole and a mock scrape over here. A lot of movement up on this top. Safe wind direction for the morning. I want to be here in a cold front, pre-rut morning. During that time of the year, your pre-rut might be the end of October if you're in southern Ohio, down in Missouri, Iowa. But don't miss this opportunity to find cold weather, find your favorite pre-rut stand, take a climb in the morning. Even if it's on a Thursday or Wednesday, if you can take one day off of work, this is worth far more than even some of the peak rut days. Try it. I think you'll love it in 2018. And I personally can't wait till about October 20th, October 18th, when I can zero in on a cold front morning and get out here, get my toes a little numb for the season, and don't miss out. The lockdown phase of the rut is a brief but very important time of the rut, because it signals the end of the pre-rut and the beginning of heavy rutting intensity. Only happens for 4, 5, 6 days at the most. Not a great length of time. In southwest Wisconsin here, that typical time is right around the first part of November, whether it's the 31st of October, 2nd of November, 3rd, 5th, sometime around in there. There's a period of 4 or 5 days where every buck gets invited to the party. Kind of imagine it that, bucks are hanging around these does. There's a large number of does coming into estrus, and there's basically a doe everywhere for a buck. Let's say the ratio is a buck to doe, or 1 buck for every 3 does, whatever it might be in your area, 1 to 5, 1 to 2, whatever it is. Every buck gets a chance to participate in the breeding during that lockdown phase. And when they do, they're not really cruising, not really rutting. A lot of times people confuse this period and they'll say, hey, there's not much going on out here. The scrapes aren't getting hit that much right then, and the rut really hasn't started. When really, they might not have had any pre-rut activity because they didn't have any mature bucks on their land or a lot of bucks on their land. You need buck movement during the peak rut when bucks are really actively seeking and searching for does. And this is that period of time where, yes, the rut has started. In fact, it's the most intense breeding time of the year, but it just gives the illusion that it's not really happening. This stand location really represents an outstanding lockdown phase rut. What I like to look for in the ingredients of a lockdown phase rut, I like to be around a lot of doe movement. I like to be between bedding, between food sources. In this case, we have a lot of bedding right over here. In these two locations here, bedding down below, and then major food down lower than that, about 300-400 yards. Great morning spot where when one of those bucks finishes breeding, there might be breed 3 or 4 does in that initial primary rut phase. They're going to actively seek for another doe, and that could happen at any time of the day. They're going to cruise. So once I pick that cold weather day and I know it's time for me to be out in this lockdown phase, which let's say down in southern Ohio, Iowa, Missouri, somewhere, Kansas, that might be around the 10th of November, somewhere around in there. And I'm going to look for a stand location that takes advantage of a lot of doe movement, that's safe and secure back near bedding areas where I can expect a lot of cruising activity to take place. And I'm going to find a pinch point in the funnel. This is actually a stand that I could hunt all day if I wanted to. During the lockdown phase, just like the pre-rut, you don't know when that mature buck's going to be cruising by. If I have favorable weather conditions all day, my wind's going back down this way, I expect all that movement to be through here, then I might sit in a stand like this all day, even during the lockdown phase. Look for those ingredients though. Look for back near bedding, between doe areas, distant food. Bucks have a purpose to come through here. A lot of doe movement. This is one of our biggest doe movement areas. And you can bet during that lockdown phase, as soon as a buck breeds that first doe and he has to look a little bit harder for that second and third doe, this is a great stand location to be. I sat here during early November this year and I think I counted 11 or 12 bucks for the first half of the day in this location, cruising by. Didn't see a buck that I really necessarily wanted to pull back on, but had an outstanding sit. And if you find these ingredients for a lockdown phase rut stand, I think you will too. The peak rut, of course, is a magical time of the year. Peak rut covers time period all the way through the first 2 weeks of November, approximately. That would match it up with most states in the north half of the country. And peak rut stand, this is one of my favorite peak rut stands, and I have to be honest, I didn't sit in it enough this year during the peak rut. The trail camera that's right down there tells me this should be my favorite peak rut stand, and why not? It has all the ingredients for a peak rut stand. Peak rut stand, I don't really want to focus more on morning hunting. I don't want to focus more on evening or just in the middle of the day. I want to focus on all 3 time frames. This stand has what it takes for it to be a great peak rut stand in 2018. We have bedding area right back there within 150 to 200 yards and all the way up on top of the point. So we have a lot of bedding area in this direction within 125, 150 yards up to 300 yards, 400 yards. It's a great funnel and pinch point right here. Everything gets necked down. And then we have big bedding up on top of the ridge over here. So if you can kind of imagine, we're in this bow tie area of bedding area. We have big food down below within 150 yards down our food plots. Behind me about 200 yards and lower, we have ag fields, distant ag fields. So we have this pinch point between bedding areas. We're close to food, but not on top of food. We're not too far back in the remote timber where we're just relating to bedding area. We're kind of in the middle of all of it. And in the middle of all of it, we have this pinch point with a steep face, funnels down to this point right here, and then we have a water hold here. And that water hole had incredible use along with the mock scrape next to it during the entire peak rut. So you're looking for an area in the peak rut that, that first 2 weeks in November after the lockdown phase, of course after the pre-rut, you're looking for a spot where you can really capture that heavy, magical peak rut, heavy cruising time where bucks are coming from far and wide. And traveling through a funnel like this that relates to all facets of their movement in a day, including bedding, feeding, some water, pinch point, long range cruising. And if you can put all those pieces together, you find the perfect peak rut stand. You're looking for a peak rut stand that basically has it all. This stand right here, if I get wind blowing off this face, out and up in the morning, down and behind me in the evening, great stand to sit all day during the peak rut. Rarely sit all day in one stand, but I do during the peak rut, especially when it has these ingredients. Now, all facets of the rut are fun to hunt. I mean, who doesn't love getting out in the woods at any time during the rut? The post-rut is an interesting time because we all can't wait for the pre-rut to begin, and then it rolls into the lockdown phase, the peak rut, and then towards the end of the rutting phase, which to me happens in that window in most states, right around between the 12th, 15th of November and the 25th of November, towards the end of November, depending on what state you're in. And what I like about this period is, of course, you have that peak, the lockdown phase, and the pre-rut, and you have all that flurry, and we plan trips around that and long weekends if we can get them off from work, and you hit the woods. But when it gets into this time of frame, it's more of like a relaxed rut. The deer are still rutty. There's still some spurts in the morning, but you don't see that long cruising, all morning long, and you're not seeing 11 bucks by 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, and you don't see that huge activity if you have that kind of buck movement in the area. What I really like to focus on in the post-rut are stands that relate directly to food in the evening. It's not to say I don't go hunt in the morning, I still do, but I find the morning activity is starting to diminish, and especially the midday activity. So I like setting up in stands like this one. We have a very narrow funnel. What's cool about this area is I can hunt this stand with one set of winds blowing down this way in the evening, and then I can hunt the stand right down there, which is our big oak tree, with winds that are going that way. So the deer movement is right between these two stands. We have a great mock scrape down there. We have a water hole, and we've chainsawed a trail right through there. There's lots of rubs in this area. The bucks love this. But we have big bedding areas right around the corner in the hollow here, and there's bedding areas all around. We have them up on the ridge. These deer filter down through here in the evening. And we have a major food plot system that starts about 125 yards down the ridge here. We can get in from the side, so we're not even exposed to this food plot. We can get out that way too. And then that's the first food plot out of 3. There's one down in the valley and then one on the other side. They're all in the open, but we have them rimmed in with switchgrass, lay of the land. They're on benches, and they're all very hidden and separated. Once those deer are past this window right here and they're going downhill to the food, then even if it's right at dark, we can get in and out of this really quickly and not spook the deer. So whether we're hunting this stand or that one over there, love focusing in the post-rut on evening food sources. I find the bucks are really looking for the ladies at that time. The does are starting to group up in areas and herd up in areas that aren't hunter pressured. A lot of hunting pressure at the end of October, early November, mid-November. And so when you get into this period of time and those deer are really focusing on evening, you're hunting that major doe movement. Don't be surprised if you get one of the biggest bucks, long-range cruisers in the area. Might even be from a mile away, a mile and a half away. Might be one of your own bucks that are in and around your land. Don't be surprised if he's found those ladies and he's found the scent in all these trails leading to food in the evening hours. Great time to hunt the post-rut. Not to say I don't take a chance in the morning, I still do. But don't forget about the evening hunts during the post-rut time of the year. It's almost the opposite of the pre-rut. I love to hunt mornings in the pre-rut. That time we're getting done with the rut. I love to hit these evenings, and this is the perfect stand location with this pinch point with the ridge up here, the drop off down there, and everything we've created with this movement, including the mock scrape, water hole, chainsawed trail through here. And if you can find these conditions on your land, you'll have an excellent stand to hunt the post-rut. Now the secondary rut is a really cool time of the year, and that takes place about 30 days after the peak rut. In this case, it'd be early December. And if you have a season like I did this year, then you get to hunt the secondary rut. And what that means is I didn't shoot a buck during the pre-rut, rut shut down, peak rut, or post-rut. And so I was still hunting during that time in early December. And boy, your tactics really change. And I talked about in the post-rut, it's great to hunt that evening movement to food sources. When you get into the secondary rut, I do see that and that's muzzleloader time in southwest Wisconsin here, in that early December time frame. And you do get to get some morning hunting up in the woods. I really let my trail cameras tell me how active the deer are. And I'll do that by hunting maybe an evening spot up in the woods or deer leading down to this food source, change some cards on the way in and out. I always change trail camera cards on the way in or out to a stand. I don't go out of my way. And that way I'm not doubling up on my pressure. But getting some late season food source planted, and I love planting food plots that actually really benefit the deer in late August, September, October, November, December, January, and into February. And if they make it throughout the entire winter, that's great. I use a lot of winter rye. Winter rye is green in the spring. The deer hammer it when they're recovering from the that post-winter recovery. Secondary rut, great time to hunt deer as they're feeding down towards those high quality food sources. And you really get a brief window in there. Try to time it when your peak rut is. Again, Southwest Wisconsin, early November. We happen to use blinds, redneck right here. We sit down here in muzzleloader season, awesome time. Son Jake shot a real nice buck 2 years ago out of this blind during that same period of time with the muzzleloader. Love hunting up in the tree stands during that time, but it all focuses on food. It focuses on that doe movement to the food, and those bucks are gonna follow that doe movement. Encourage you to not miss that secondary rut, of course, unless you filled your tag, but great time of the year and don't miss out. Now during the rut and hunting the rut, we can talk about choosing those days that are perfect weather days. You have to pick the best timing. And then we can talk about, of course, we've talked about how to hunt each phase of the rut, whether it's a pre-rut, the rut shutdown, the peak rut, the post-rut, secondary rut. You can have a strategy for each one of those, but how many stand locations, how many properties, how many blind locations are burned out before you even get to the peak rut, let alone the post-rut and into the secondary rut? Everything you can do to lower the stress level on your property, offer high quality food sources, offer high quality cover, and keep those conditions not just great for the opening day of bow season, but actually consistent throughout the entire window of the hunting season, and especially the rut. I want to see each of you take advantage of every phase of the rut if you choose to hunt them, and if you have hunters on the land that are still hunting all the way through the secondary rut, like my season was this year. We use screening right here around our blinds. You have switchgrass planted all throughout this valley, and we use non-invasive access behind the ridge systems. And bottom line, you can choose the best days to hunt. You can choose the best locations based on the phase of the rut. You can get the timing right. But folks, if you don't keep the hunting pressure down on your land, it's really all for naught. And I'd like to see you not have your stands and your land burned out before the pre-rut even begins. I actually hunt from opening day on, so it's not like you can't hunt. In fact, I think a property managed property gives you that opportunity to hunt early and often. If you have to wait till the peak rut to hunt, then it's probably a potential that you're burning out your stands, and it's not a quality setup as far as I'm concerned. So get the stress level low, hunt the entire rut, let alone the entire season, and I look forward to hearing how you did.